Which email marketing platform is the best fit for your e-commerce brand? And which one is the best overall? Let's talk about that. What's up, guys? My name's Skylar. I'm the founder of a retention agency called Influx Labs, and today we're going to be examining the best email marketing platform that you should be using to start with retention marketing for your e-commerce brand. With the amount of email service providers that exist today, it can be super difficult to commit to a single one, knowing that there could be one that is cheaper with better features, better user friendliness, more variety, or just a more helpful support team. So what I'm going to do today is actually narrow in on the 3 most popular email service providers and rate them based on the following categories: user friendliness, features and sophistication, support team, and the price, so that I can settle this debate once and for all, help you stop struggling to make a decision on your ESP, and get your ecom brand started with email marketing right away. Platform number 1, Klaviyo. If you've looked into email marketing at all, or just retention marketing in general, then you're probably somewhat familiar with Klaviyo or have at least heard of it. But what makes Klaviyo so special, and why is it the number 1 choice for e-commerce brands when it comes to retention marketing? Let's examine why. Starting with our first metric, user friendliness. One of the most overlooked yet important things within any software is how easy it is to use. So when it comes to Klaviyo, setting it up is super simple, right? Whether you're migrating from a different email service provider or joining for the first time, Klaviyo kind of really holds your hand in the entire setup and integration process. And so you are able to, get these things connected to your Shopify store, or if you have an HTML store, you can get Klaviyo connected really easily. And then you can also set up, your tracking and import your contacts. It'll show you how to do all of this. So this is, a big plus because you can get started right away and they help you with that process. Another positive is that Klaviyo's user interface is intuitive and generally pretty easy to use. So as you can see here, all of the features are actually just on the left side of the screen, and this acts as their menu. So you have home, campaigns, flows, sign-up forms, audience, content, analytics, and conversations. So everything that you need is right there, and it's easy to navigate. The only potential drawback is that there are a lot of features here. And so, this is just naturally going to take a little bit more time to learn and get used to going through. It's a bit more advanced than a lot of its peers. So that is one potential drawback, but the interface is generally very helpful, very intuitive, and easy to use. So that is definitely a positive for Klaviyo. When it comes to our next criteria, features and the sophistication of these features, in my opinion, this is where Klaviyo kind of starts to set itself apart from its competitors. So when it comes to integrations, Klaviyo has 360 plus integrations that it offers for ecom brands that they can add to personalize their customer experience. And if that wasn't enough, they also offer API settings so that developers can actually build their own integrations to add to Klaviyo and their Shopify store. So that is a great feature is that you have all these integrations. It helps you really personalize the customer experience. That's great. Segmentation is another really, really strong feature and a very sophisticated one that Klaviyo has. So the segmentation on Klaviyo gets super, super granular. And I said that it's almost scary here because that's how specific that you can actually get within Klaviyo's segmentation. So, for example, you can make a segment on your list for something as specific as, predicted gender, as well as location by someone's zip code. If you wanted to send, like a location specific, Chicago campaign to people that were just in this area, you could do that. So this is a super powerful tool to have when you're sending your email campaigns. And then also the interface within their segmentation on their segment builder is pretty simple to follow. So you would just, put in the name of your segment and then the definition that you want the people in this segment to follow so that you can, have certain conditions. The people that meet these conditions are in the segment. The people that don't meet the conditions are not in the segment. So super great, powerful tool that Klaviyo has that you can leverage. Flows and automations. This is yet another strong point for Klaviyo. And I know I've been bragging them up, but there are some negatives, but their flows and automations are generally really good. So Klaviyo has a visual workflow builder that's easy to use even if you are a beginner. So you see an example of it here. you simply add a trigger. They have a bunch of triggers for different automations based on things that are happening on your website. So for example, here is what a welcome series trigger would be. So someone is added to your email list, and then you can choose to send an email. You can put a time delay between it. You can also do, different filters and conditional splits that change based on someone's actions so that you can send them down a specific path. So things like this include a contact submitting a form, clicking a link in your email, opting to subscribe to a list, etc. Those are things that can trigger flows. And this way you can create unique workflows for any action that is taken on your website. So their automations are really good. And it's also pretty simple to build them out within their actual workflow editor. So another strong point from Klaviyo, email campaigns. So when it comes to email campaigns in Klaviyo, they actually give you 3 options. So one is a drag and drop editor that allows you to drag and drop blocks and layouts into your design. 2 is a text only builder in case you want to send plain text emails. And then 3rd, they also allow for custom code for very unique emails. So if you want to code out all of the blocks of your emails, you also have the option of doing that. But generally their drag and drop features are pretty good. So although there's some pretty customizable functionality here, and like I said, their drag and drop feature is easy to use and pretty solid, they don't look that great when they're built in Klaviyo. So what we'll actually do for our clients is pretty much design all of our emails externally in something like Photoshop or Figma. And then we'll end up just dragging these in as image slices into Klaviyo. Just because it looks, more congruent that way and generally higher quality, and you can make it look closer to your landing page. But if you don't need, the prettiest designs of all time, this drag and drop editor is probably going to be sufficient for you if you don't want to get overcomplicated and super fancy. And they also offer 100+ email design templates if you're in a rush, and these generally tend to be pretty decent. Another super important aspect of email marketing is actually being able to grow your email list and monitor the rate at which this list is growing. And the way that Klaviyo allows you to do this is actually by creating sign-up forms to collect email addresses and phone numbers via pop-ups, full page forms or flyouts, which are, just pop-up forms that kind of slide onto the screen. And then they also allow for embedded forms. So generally what we'll do is use pop-up forms, and the Klaviyo editor for pop-up forms is generally pretty decent. So this is kind of a similar situation to what I mentioned with the campaigns above, is that they look decent within the editor. And if you don't want to get super fancy, if you just want to have, a solid form that's going to convert a decent amount of your traffic, then this Klaviyo form builder is probably going to work pretty fine for you. But there are better editors. So if you want to go external, when you're using Klaviyo, then we recommend using amped.io. This is the best software that we found for creating pop-ups. But generally the layout is pretty decent. So you can see here, this is what it looks like. You would select either left side image, right side background, or no image. And then you could choose the image that you have, choose the headline, subheader, and then what the actual buttons are going to be to collect people onto your list. So generally their pop-up forms are pretty decent. And this is not a strong point necessarily because it could be better, but this isn't an area of concern within Klaviyo. Another feature Klaviyo offers is data tracking, and Klaviyo has a pretty comprehensive data tracking system. So you can look at things like attributed revenue, open rates and click-through rates, as well as conversion rates of your emails, as well as things like rate of list growth. You can see the people that are subscribing and unsubscribing, and you can view all of this on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly timeline by looking at the revenue wheel that they have, and all of their data on the dashboard. So this is really good for helping you make decisions on what to change and split test in your emails so that you can find an optimal strategy for your specific audience. So this is a general look at what Klaviyo's dashboard looks like. So they will have a revenue wheel, so you can actually see like where the majority of your revenue is coming from, whether that's your flows or your campaigns. You can see your total revenue, your revenue from Klaviyo specifically, so that you can see what percentage of your overall revenue that is. And then you can see the money that your flows and campaigns specifically are making. And then you can actually get more granular in looking at individual flow email and individual campaign performance, as well as the size of your list and the rate that it's growing at. So this is pretty comprehensive and super solid as far as data tracking goes within email service providers. The final feature that I want to highlight that Klaviyo offers is actually a really strong one, and that is their SMS marketing. So they have their own sophisticated SMS system, and this is a positive because this means you can keep your email and your SMS marketing in the same place with the same user interface without having to, pay for and use a third party like Attentive or something else. So Klaviyo provides 3 SMS opt-in or consent forms, similar to the pop-up forms that we talked about before. So they have regular sign-up forms, which will just be a pop-up. They also have click-to-text forms, and they have consent at checkout forms. So when someone checks out, they can actually sign up for SMS as well. So once you've collected phone numbers with the consent of your audience using these forms that Klaviyo allows, you can easily send them campaigns and automations in the same way that the campaigns and the automations work previously listed in the actual email section. So it's very similar UI to that as far as the workflows go, super simple to set up, and the campaigns as well. So here's an example. You would simply just type the text in here, and then you would see a preview of what it would look like, and you can actually send this to yourself as well to test it. And then, you would just schedule it and send it out. Okay, time for the third criteria, the support team. This is one of the major negatives that I'm actually going to talk about when it comes to Klaviyo. Klaviyo's support team in general, in my experience, is not very responsive. And a lot of times when they do respond, they'll just send you to, a page to read an answer instead of actually helping you one-on-one. This is like a common theme that I've noticed within SaaS support teams, is that they'll generally just refer you to, a simple page where they have some answers, but not very sophisticated ones, not very niche details. And this is one major knock on Klaviyo. However, they do have a super extensive collection of pages. So when they send you there, if you dig, most of the time you can find what you're looking for kind of in their support archives, but it would be super nice if they would just answer the questions that you ask them and, help you one-on-one with your specific problem so you didn't have to dig. So this is definitely a major knock on Klaviyo. And it's also, as we go forward, take support into consideration, because anytime you have a problem, this is the difference between things being a major headache or, just being a small problem that can be solved in a matter of minutes. The final criteria we're going to cover is price. Klaviyo's pricing is a point of contention for a lot of ecom brands that want to sign up with them, especially ones that are just getting started and don't have a ton of capital to put into something that isn't going to make them, a ton back if they don't have a bunch of customers to retain. So Klaviyo has a tiered pricing plan based on the size of your audience, and this gives you a little bit of room to control your pricing, but the jumps in price are pretty big. So this is generally what their tier looks like. This is with a small amount of active profiles, 1,001 to 1,500, and usually the tiers will go up like every 1,000 or 500 profiles that are added. So 60 a month, 45 a month, or this 0 a month is kind of useless unless you don't have any customers. But this is how it works. It's tiered pricing. This is what it would look like if you had 200,000 to 250,000, which is one of their max pricing tiers. It would be this much. One of the other problems within Klaviyo is that they've actually increased their pricing without telling anyone in the past. So aside from the importance of being conscious of the size of your list so that your rate doesn't randomly go up with this tiered pricing based on active profiles, it's also important to note that, Klaviyo has increased their pricing in the past out of nowhere. So that's not a great sign for the future. That usually means they're going to do it again because they've gotten away with it before. So that is something to take into consideration. But usually, and within the three softwares that we're going to cover today, they have this same tiered pricing based on profiles. So it's not uncommon. So now that we've gone over each category, let's give Klaviyo a rating so that we can see how it stacks up versus its competitors that we're going to cover right after this. For the category of user friendliness, we give this an 8 out of 10. The reason being the UI is very clear and easy to navigate, but it's a bit more complex in nature than some of its competitors, making it a little bit harder to learn than the others. Still 8 out of 10 rating. For the features and sophistication category, this is where it really excels. This is Klaviyo's strong point. If you're looking for sophisticated automations, segmentation, and customizability, Klaviyo excels at all of this. And the only reason I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is because it's missing, some like interactive emails, being able to check out from email, being able to sign up, to lists right within the actual email. But this is very rare, and this most of the time requires, another integration that mainly email programs don't have. So this is a little bit unfair, but still I can't give it a 10 out of 10 because of that reason, but it's very sophisticated. For the category of the support team, this is where it lacks a little bit. This is its weakest point. And the reason why is because it's about a 60-40 chance that you're going to get a solid answer from their support team. And the only redeeming quality is their actual website support archive that has a lot of the answers that you're looking for, but you have to dig. For the final criteria that we have, price, 7 out of 10. It's not that cheap, but the tiered levels kind of give you more control over your pricing. You just have to make sure that you're paying attention to your list size, the rate that it's growing at. And I also bumped it down a little bit just because they have a history of raising prices. So the total score for Klaviyo out of 40 is going to be 30, which really isn't too shabby. This is a super strong showing. And if a lot of this sounds like it would fit your needs, then I would go with Klaviyo. Let's get into the next software. The next email software that we're going to cover and review is Mailchimp. And if you're currently on Mailchimp or you are a Mailchimp fan in general, buckle up because we're probably not going to agree. Mailchimp is owned by a mega corporation known as Intuit, and because of that, it's probably the second most popular ESP behind Klaviyo. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're using this or if you're familiar with it. But is it what it's chalked up to be? Let's see. Starting out with user friendliness, setting up Mailchimp is simple, and just like Klaviyo, it holds your hand and it walks you through the integration process step by step. So it's a very similar process, but it's a little bit clunkier than Klaviyo's, and clunkiness is going to be a common theme that you notice within Mailchimp. So as for Mailchimp's interface, again, pretty similar to Klaviyo, pretty easy to navigate. All the features, again, left side of the dashboard, campaigns, automations, audience, analytics, website content, integrations, everything that you need to know is here. And it's even a little bit less complex than Klaviyo. So I would imagine that it would be easier for a beginner to actually get used to using Mailchimp. Unfortunately, the user interface right here on the surface is about where my praise for Mailchimp ends and the problems begin. Okay, I lied. There's one more positive. Mailchimp allows you to set up most of the integrations that Klaviyo allows for. As you can see here in the Connect Apps and Integrations section, you can actually search these up and connect them to Mailchimp. So that is one less positive. Side note, wanted to slip that in and give them their credit. But after that, when it comes to the features and their sophistication, things get a little bleak. Mailchimp's segmentation is as if they tried to copy Klaviyo's work, but the teacher caught them halfway through and they had to take the rest of their test in the hallway. The reason why is because it seems to offer the same options as Klaviyo on the surface, but a bunch of the key details that makes Klaviyo's segmenting so targeted and so useful is missing, and a lot of the same features that it does share with Klaviyo, they just don't work the way that they should. For example, you can't get super specific with the options. And for email engagement, let's take this screenshot for example. Klaviyo, if you were to try to Mailchimp segmentation is as if they tried to take Mailchimp's segmentation is as if they tried to copy Klaviyo's work, but the teacher caught them halfway through and they had to take the rest of their test in the hallway. Mailchimp seems to offer the same options as Klaviyo on the surface, but a lot of the key details that actually make Klaviyo's segmenting so effective are missing, and a lot of the same features that they do share with Klaviyo just don't work the way that they should in Mailchimp for whatever reason. For example, take this. This is their segment builder. It doesn't look too bad. The user interface, again, is kind of simple here, but let's take this as an example. So email engagement. If you wanted to build a segment within Klaviyo based on how engaged people are with your emails, you'd have a bunch of different options to choose from. So you could say, I want people who have opened my email, clicked my email, and bought from my email to be in this segment. People that did all of that in the last 30 days. You'd be able to get that granular and that specific with people that interacted, engaged in your email in a very specific way. You'd be able to choose. Within Mailchimp, the only option that they have here is that their email engagement is new, rarely, sometimes, or often. And when it gets this either or in the options, you lose a lot of your customizability that actually allows you to get super granular with your segmentation. So because Mailchimp does this throughout all of their segmenting, it actually ends up being really simple and not very useful, and you can't get very specific at all with your segments. When it comes to Mailchimp's flows and automations, it's not much better. Their automations feel clunky and outdated. The workflow logic that you use rarely makes sense, and sometimes when it does make sense, it still doesn't function. The flow triggers are also super limited, and you're not actually even allowed to trigger a flow by when someone joins a segment, which means that you're often stuck manually adding leads into these flows to have them trigger instead of just having them automatically trigger on their own. As far as the actual building process of these workflows, it's super confusing and it makes your brain hurt. And I'll show you an example here. So these are the starting points that you can use in Mailchimp. It's based on contact activity or shopping activity are the main ones that you're going to use. And basically all that you can do is trigger these flows by someone joining a list, someone purchasing, or someone taking an action within your emails. They don't even have an abandoned checkout flow. They just have an abandoned cart. So very limited as far as their triggers go. And then this is actually what it looks like within their flow logic. It's blurry here, but essentially there's a ton of different paths that you can take. And a lot of times the conditional splits that you use don't actually function in the way that they should. So automations and flows get a big fat F for Mailchimp. When it comes to email campaigns, Mailchimp gives you the same three options for creation as Klaviyo: a drag and drop editor, a text-only builder, and an HTML editor. But honestly, I'd be lying if I said it was just as good as Klaviyo's. It honestly just feels old. It's manageable, but it's super clunky and not very enjoyable to use. There's also some really weird issues that you'll run into with like border spacing of emails and just small details that seem unnecessarily difficult to fix. And so even the templates as well are just pretty limited. So there's 137 templates within Mailchimp. There are like 500 plus within Klaviyo. So if you do rely on the template as well for your emails, then this is kind of a detriment to you. And these templates are also pretty outdated in design. So while it's not their worst feature, I do think it's better than their flows and the way that you build those. But the actual email campaign and email editor in here is a bit clunky, and their templates are super limited. Unfortunately, the bashing of Mailchimp doesn't end there as we get to their list growth tools, because their actual sign-up form builder for your website is super, super outdated. It honestly looks like a MySpace page from the early 2010s. And so if you were to use Mailchimp, then you would actually have to use and pay for a third-party form generator like Amped, because there's just no way that you can build sign-up forms that look congruent and the same quality as your landing page using Mailchimp's form editor. And you can take a look here. This is what it looks like, and you can even probably just tell from this screenshot that this is kind of outdated. Like, they have text options. They have some layout options where you can like move it around slightly. But generally, you can only do a couple things and the design just isn't going to look great. When it comes to data tracking, Mailchimp actually has pretty decent tracking for the analytics on your email campaigns. Things like your open rate, your click-through rate, and your conversion rate are going to be shown pretty clearly. These main key performance indicators right here, but it's actually lacking for whatever reason when it comes to your flows and your automations. So for example, Mailchimp doesn't let you look at flow analytics on a month-to-month basis. So what this means is if you want to know like the previous month, how well you did, you would have to subtract that from the current month and like do some math to get your revenue numbers correct, which could simply be fixed if they were to just add analytics where you could look at month-to-month data. But for whatever reason, they haven't. And I think that across the board, they just generally, their company's making a lot of money, so they aren't really focused on updating anything. They don't really have an incentive. And it really shows in areas like this. Okay, support and price, the last two chances for Mailchimp to redeem themselves. I've done a lot of hating, so I'm going to make the support part really brief. Their support team might as well not even exist. And the reason I say this is not because they're mean, not because they're bad people, but because the answers that they actually give you are not very helpful. It seems like they've hired VAs who don't specialize in retention marketing. And because of this, they rarely, if ever, have answers to your questions. And I've even been given answers that were just wrong upon further review, or maybe they didn't necessarily know how to solve one of the problems. So they just give you a default answer and then end the conversation, and it'll end up just not helping. So their support team is basically non-existent, which is ironic because you would think, with all the problems that we mentioned above, that they would have to have a killer support team for people to keep staying and paying them monthly subscriptions, but they don't. Now that we've gone through kind of all the details of Mailchimp, let's give it a rating so that we can compare it to Klaviyo and the next email service provider that we're going to go over. So user friendliness, 5 out of 10. It's not very complicated and it's easy to use on the surface, but this is kind of self-sabotaging because it's easy to use because it doesn't have a ton of features, right? And the features that it does have, they don't function very well. So that's a 5 out of 10. So into features and sophistication, I give it a 2 out of 10. This is really bad, and the reason why is because it's missing key details that make email and SMS marketing so powerful in the first place. It has basic things that you need for retention marketing that just either don't exist or don't work. Price, 8 out of 10. This is really Mailchimp's only redeeming quality. It's a bit cheaper than the other email marketing softwares that you're going to see. And, it's easy to get started with for that reason. But that's kind of it. Support, 4 out of 10. They are responsive, but they rarely give helpful answers. And so it kind of counters that in the first place. And when they do, it takes a long time and several conversations to actually come to a conclusion on something. So my overall score for Mailchimp out of 40 is 19. And my honest recommendation is just to skip this one if you have an opportunity to use another. So now that we've gotten the bad out of the way, I'm actually excited to go over this one because in my opinion, it can give Klaviyo a real run for its money. So this is a new up-and-coming retention software called Sendlane, and they actually aren't afraid to kind of deviate away from the formula that Klaviyo and Mailchimp have built. So starting out with user friendliness, just like Klaviyo and Mailchimp, Sendlane has its menu on the left side of the screen with all of its categories, which makes it really easy to scroll through and find what you're looking for. And it is a bit more advanced, as you can see, than how basic the Mailchimp dashboard is. And there is, a bit more going on here than even the Klaviyo dashboard. But in my opinion, this is, the cleanest looking dashboard of all the email service providers. And because it's so clean, it's actually very simple to use. So I've found that this is kind of my most enjoyable, email service provider to use. And moving into the integrations, these are also pretty advanced. They offer a lot of them, and they also have that API system that allows you to integrate your own. So this is similar to Klaviyo, but I have to point out there are still noticeably less integrations with Sendlane than Klaviyo. I don't know if it's because they're just starting out and it's kind of like a newer software, but they do not have anywhere near as many integrations as Klaviyo, like we mentioned above. Klaviyo has like 350 plus integrations, and I think Sendlane would be lucky to even have a third of that amount. So that is one thing. If you're big on integrations and kind of customizing your experience, that is something that's lacking. But they do have all the key integrations. So like, you're not missing out. It's just kind of the extra stuff that they don't really have. For their features and their sophistication, this is super, super solid. So Sendlane has extremely similar features to what we saw in Klaviyo earlier, with a relatively equal level of sophistication to what Klaviyo is doing. So I think they're kind of neck and neck in this area, but I'll still run you through their features here. So segmentation, they offer a number of hyper-specific segments based on and/or conditions, just like Klaviyo. And again, you can get super granular with your audience. So everything that we mentioned that was missing from Mailchimp is again present within Sendlane. You can get super granular. You can segment based on, again, location, gender, any action that they took on their website at all. And this allows you to build out really key detailed segments. And it's also a super simple way of doing it. So as you can see here, you would just click on these conditions and build them to what you want the segment to be. So super user friendly, and the segmenting is also very advanced. Moving into flows and automations, although Klaviyo has the same functionality of Sendlane when it comes to automations, I actually do prefer the user interface of Sendlane here, because it makes creating workflows like much more simple and straightforward, whereas Mailchimp was super all over the place, and Klaviyo is also a bit clustered when it comes to the actual UI, even though their flows are really good. So this is just kind of a preference thing on which look you like better between this and Klaviyo as for their automations, because they both function in a very similar way and they're both very effective. Email campaigns. So Sendlane's email builder is not quite as good as Klaviyo's, I'll say that. And the reason for that is because it just isn't quite as advanced. So Klaviyo really, really has their email building format down. And they just make it super simple to drag and drop and plop things in. Sendlane has all the same ability here, but it just lacks some of the advancements. One of them being the variety of templates that Klaviyo has in comparison to Sendlane. Sendlane is kind of lacking this huge variety of templates, whereas Klaviyo provides a bunch of them. And I also don't really like the Sendlane templates as much as I like the Klaviyo ones, even though I don't tend to use templates that often. So if that's something you rely on a ton, again, Klaviyo has the slight advantage in this area, but their email campaign builder is super solid as well, and they make it really simple. Moving into the SMS marketing feature, Sendlane has great SMS marketing. So their SMS has a ton of pre-built automations, as well as a super simple user interface for writing texts. And something that they have that we'll go over a little bit later as well, that is a major advantage over Klaviyo and obviously Mailchimp, is that they have in-house SMS experts that will provide you help. All you have to do is ask, and they're very responsive. So we'll go over that again in the support section, but that's something to note, is that they have that expertise here. But yeah, like Klaviyo, they offer everything you need for SMS. You're not going to have to go to a third-party provider. The only problem is that their SMS is significantly more expensive than Klaviyo's SMS actually is. So we'll get into that later as well, but there's some give and take here. But as far as just a system, their SMS is super, super solid. For email list growth and their data analysis, Sendlane just recently upgraded their sign-up forms. So just like Klaviyo, you can create a pop-up, flyout, or embedded form from here. And as far as their customizability, it's pretty much on par with what we saw in Klaviyo. And it really has most of what you need to create, a solid sign-up form if you're just trying to, make a pretty simple one that's going to convert well. Their targeting on here is really good, and they offer features like how frequent do you want to show the sign up form? Do you want to show it when people come to your website or when they're leaving your website? Things like this that allow you to customize the experience and optimize for getting traffic to sign up to your email list. So email list growth is really solid. And same goes for their data analytics. So Sendlane, in my experience, has the best data tracking of any ESP, including Klaviyo. And that's just because of the way that they lay it out, honestly. Their dashboard is super simple to follow, and they show all the data you need, like attributed revenue, open rates, click-through rates, conversion rates, rate of list growth, and then you can also, go individual campaigns and automations and look at how they're performing. But it's just, it really understands how to make it, simple to digest a lot of information. So that's why I love this dashboard. You can see some of the examples of what it looks like here. It's just super, super simple to follow when, they could have easily overcomplicated it. So their data analytics, also super solid in my experience, the best overall out of everything we've covered here. Lastly, support and price. These are two areas where Sendlane is pretty unique in comparison to the two competitors that we covered earlier in the video. Their support team is the single biggest advantage that Sendlane has over every single other email software. So not only do they have real human beings on their support team instead of just chat bots, they actually have a responsive team of email and SMS experts who are always on call to help you. So unlike Klaviyo, they respond quick and they don't just send you to some page to go find the answer for yourself. And unlike Mailchimp, these are actual experts who know what they're doing when it comes to email and SMS. So they can help you a lot more than those other support teams. I know it's shocking, but yeah, our real support team will actually answer your questions. So yeah, Sendlane crushes in this area. And I've even talked to the CEO about specific problems that I've had while using Sendlane. So he's super accessible. The rest of the support team is even more accessible. So you never have problems in this area. This is a huge benefit of Sendlane. Price. So they have tiered pricing. This is what you're going to see through all of these email marketing apps, softwares. They're all going to have tiered pricing, but it is slightly cheaper than Klaviyo when it comes to email, but it's more expensive when it comes to SMS. So honestly, the pricing really evens out between them and Klaviyo, and it's going to be pretty even. However, one of the main advantages that Sendlane has over Klaviyo is that they just don't randomly increase their prices, at least so far. They haven't randomly increased their prices on us, so I give them the advantage there because Klaviyo tends to do that. And Klaviyo is kind of a bigger entity, so I think that there's another level of separation between them and their actual customers that Sendlane doesn't necessarily have yet because it's a bit newer. So I think they care more, quite honestly. That being said, let's plug Sendlane into our rating chart and see how it stacks up versus its competitors. User friendliness, we give it a 9 out of 10 rating. Although it's a bit more complex than Mailchimp and there's a bit more going on than Klaviyo, the UI actually makes it very simple to use. And so I do give it the slight advantage over Klaviyo for its well-designed user interface layout. For the features and sophistication, I give it an 8 out of 10, 1 point lower than Klaviyo. It's very sophisticated segmentation and their automations are great. The workflows are super easy to set up, but I have to knock it down a point because it does have less integrations than what Klaviyo has. For price, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. This is pretty on par with other email service providers. It's slightly cheaper than Klaviyo for emails, slightly more expensive for SMS, and it is more expensive than Mailchimp, but that's not very relevant considering. Support, 10 out of 10. this is the one perfect feature that I've found in all these email service providers. They do have a perfect support team, and this is the main appeal of Sendlane, in my opinion, is that they will always go out of their way to help you. And because of this, because they're experts, you can get issues solved very quickly, and you can also learn a bit more when you're actually implementing things with this help. So all in all, I give it a 34 out of 40. This is the highest rating out of the 3 that we've covered today. They have excellent customer support. They have similar features to Klaviyo, but I think that this really does push it over the edge and put it out in front slightly above Klaviyo overall. So I think it's obvious that the conversation between which email service provider you should use really comes down to Klaviyo and Sendlane. In my experience, those are the 2 best by far that we've used, and we've broken down the positives and negatives of each. So now you can make a more informed decision on which is right for your business. But if you are still not sold based on pricing, if you're just getting started with your ecom store and you want to do email marketing, but you don't want to pay for something super expensive, don't be afraid to explore other options. I would just recommend that you use this video, these charts, these ratings, this criteria as a point of comparison so that you know what to look for and what to avoid. And if that's the case, you can go out and maybe find some program that is significantly better than the ones that we listed in this video. It's very possible. So yeah, some other solid options if you want to explore more using this criteria that we didn't go over today are Yotpo and Loops. I've heard great things about both of these platforms, so I want to shout them out. Go ahead and look at those along with Klaviyo and Sendlane to choose which is right for you. And yeah, other than that, if you want to keep this document for yourself, just to look over if you're looking at certain, email service providers and you want to keep this, then I'm going to actually leave this document in the description below, and you can, go through and check it out. And other than that, I appreciate you watching, and see you in the next one.